Well, a warm welcome to this talk. It's Thursday, the 16th of September. Now, I get asked frequently asked questions, and I do try and answer them when I can. So lots of people are asking me about ivermectin, and particularly the recent report from the Australian government sites on ivermectin. So let's look at that now and see what the Australians are saying. But if you're short of time for this video, I will give you a bit of a bottom line on it because there is a bit of detail to go through. The main arguments here put forward by the Australian Department of Health against ivermectin seems to be, firstly, that it discourages people from getting vaccinated. And if people think they're covered with ivermectin, they could be a transmission risk. So that's one, it discourages people from getting vaccinated. The second one is that some social media accounts have been getting the dose wrong. We'll pad that one out in a minute. And the third reason is that they're running out of stock for other vital reasons. Now, let's just say for now, all of those reasons given by the Australian government are open to critique. So we'll do that now. Now, this is the site here. If you want to look at it for yourself, just to make sure I'm not making anything up, the whole report is there. Not too extensive and very accessible, very easy to read, quite comprehensible, nothing difficult about it. Now, this is from the Australian Government, Department of Health, Therapeutic Goods Administration, TGA. New restrictions on prescribing ivermectin for COVID-19. So these are new restrictions. Came out on the 10th of September, so about 6 days ago now. So Therapeutic Goods Administration, acting on the advice of the Advisory Committee for Medicines Scheduling. So this seems to have gone through the appropriate channels in Australia. Placed new restrictions on the prescribing of oral ivermectin. General practitioners are now only able to prescribe ivermectin for TGA-approved conditions, scabies and certain parasitic infections. Now let me clarify what's been happening here. General practitioners in Australia have been prescribing ivermectin, and now the Therapeutic Goods Administration is telling general practitioners, these are qualified doctors in Australia, that they can't prescribe it for the viral indications, is what they are saying. They can only give it for specific indications, which are scabies and certain parasitic infections. Certain specialists will be able to still prescribe the drug if they think it's appropriate for a particular patient. And I would have been surprised if the GPs in Australia had been prescribing it to patients who they didn't think it was appropriate for, but this is what the Australian authorities are saying. Ivermectin is not approved for COVID-19 use in Australia, of course, we know this, that is the case, and yet some doctors were prescribing it. They say it's currently strongly discouraged by the National COVID Clinical Evidence Task Force, fair enough, the World Health Organization, yes, and the US Food and Drug Administration, yes. They seem to forget to mention that the National Institutes of Health in the United States puts an open question on ivermectin. There's insufficient evidence for the COVID-19 treatment guidelines panel to recommend either for or against the use of ivermectin in the treatment of COVID-19. So that is from the NIH in the United States. But as I say, that wasn't mentioned in the Australia report. Now, getting on to their reasons, and this is where it gets really quite interesting. I might be revealing something quite fundamental, actually, but I'll let you decide that when we look at it. First reason. So there's a number of significant public health risks associated with taking ivermectin in an attempt to prevent COVID-19 infection rather than getting vaccinated. Well, we're not talking about vaccines here. We're talking about ivermectin. Now, I strongly advocate vaccination, of course, because I believe in preventing disease. But I also believe if treatments are available for disease, we should treat it. Prevention is better than cure, of course. So vaccination is important. But why they seem to be conflating the issue of ivermectin as a prophylaxis with vaccine as a prophylaxis is not really quite explained on their documentation. Ivermectin in an attempt to prevent people infection rather than getting vaccinated. So I would certainly say get vaccinated as well. I don't quite see where they're coming from there, unless they're suggesting that people will be taking ivermectin instead of getting vaccinated, which I would go against the advice of every doctor in Australia. That I would imagine every single general practitioner in Australia would be advising vaccination. It would just be bizarre if they weren't. If your general practitioner in Australia is not advising you to be vaccinated, do let me know. I will be astounded if there's any general practitioners in Australia that are not recommending vaccination. So quite why those two should be mutually exclusive, I don't really quite see. Individuals who believe that they are protected from infection by taking ivermectin may choose not to get tested or to seek medical care if they experience symptoms. Well, again, if this ivermectin has been prescribed by the doctor, presumably the doctor could say, look, if you get symptoms still, come and see me. You know, I'm your doctor. I want to see you if you get sick. You would imagine they could say that. Doing so has the potential to spread the risk of COVID-19 infection throughout the community. So what they're saying here is, well, people that are taking ivermectin probably won't want to get vaccinated. People who believe they're protected from infection by taking ivermectin may choose not to get tested or to seek medical advice. Well, they could be, or not to get, if they get symptoms. Well, I would have thought symptomatic people would, but if they were vaccinated as well, their risk would presumably be the same or less of anyone else. So is this getting to the heart of the matter? So what the Australian authorities seem to be saying here, not that ivermectin's good or bad or indifferent or dangerous or lethal or brilliant, they don't seem to be saying any of that. Well, what's going to stop people getting vaccinated? And if people are taking ivermectin and they think it's going to protect them against infection, then if they get symptoms, they might just go on spreading the disease. So is this the heart of the issue? Is ivermectin being poo-pooed around the world because people think it will discourage people from being vaccinated? I don't know. I'm just reporting what they have said pretty directly, actually, from this Australian site. There it is. Read it for yourself. That's what the Australian authorities are saying. I simply report what they say. So that's their first reason. Secondly, the dose of ivermectin that are being advocated for use in unreliable social media posts and other sources of COVID-19 and other sources for COVID-19 are significantly higher than those approved and found to be safe for scabies or parasitic treatment. So the second reason they're saying that they don't want their doctors to prescribe ivermectin is that they are unreliable social media posts which get the dose wrong. Now this is rather strange. Now, in Australia, I believe they have something called the Australian Medicines Handbook. Now, I don't subscribe to this, so I couldn't actually get a copy of it. But when you go into a drug, imagine you're looking for a drug. Say I take atorvastatin. So it says atorvastatin, good for lowering cholesterol. For dose, please see a convenient social media post. I suspect it doesn't say that. I suspect it says 20 milligrams or whatever the appropriate dose is. And for sure, I've actually looked at this document here from Australia, and this says quite a lot about ivermectin. It's the official Australian site, as far as I can gather. Starts off with a description. Ivermectin is derived from the avermectins, a class of highly active broad-spectrum antiparasitic agents, isolated from fermentation broths of Streptomyces avermitilis. So that's the bug that they brew it up with. So. And this does go on, of course, and give the precise dose. It gives a lot of information about it, and it does give the precise dose. Nowhere on this document does it say refer to unreliable social media posts to determine the dose that doctors want to prescribe to their patients. I mean, this is just weird that it says this, positively weird. So because some unreliable social media posts are getting the dose wrong, there's a problem. And these higher doses can be associated with serious adverse effects. Well, of course, yes. Serious adverse effects including severe nausea if you give too much, vomiting if you give too much, dizziness if you give too much, neurological effects such as dizziness, seizure and coma. Of course, it's a dangerous drug in overdose. Of course. Now, in the UK, we have this thing called the British National Formulary, which we have here. This is from the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, and that gives us the dose of the drug in quite precise terms for various indications. So for chronic strongyloides infection, 200 micrograms per kilogram for daily 2 doses. Now for ivermectin, to be fair, you might need to give it a bit longer than that, but the doses are here. So, and this is absolutely standard in pharmacology, so it's 200 micrograms per kilogram, which is 0.2 milligrams. So if I weigh 80 kilograms, I wish I weigh a little bit more, but so if I weigh 80 kilograms, then it's 0.2 milligrams times 80, which I think works out at about, work it out for yourself, it's about 16 milligrams, I think. These things are so well known. I mean, when I was 19 years old, I had to do a drug round as part of my assessments to be a registered nurse, and the charge nurse who was doing the assessment came in and he said, what are the prerequisites of giving drugs? And you had to say the right dose of the right drug to the right patient via the right route at the right time. If you didn't get those 5 rights, you failed. You didn't do the assessment. So of course everyone memorised those. These are chiselled into the brains of all nurses and doctors. You've got to give the right dose. And yet here in Australia they're saying that because social media gets it wrong, doctors are not allowed to prescribe. General practitioners, doctors are not allowed to get it wrong because some people are not allowed to prescribe the drug because some people get it wrong on social media. This is positively weird. You know, there's a joke that pharmacy is poison in small doses, and it's basically true. You give too much of anything, it's going to be poisonous. So can overdoses of other drugs be a problem? Well, just to give you one example here, in A&E you spend, I wouldn't say half your life, but maybe 5% of your life treating paracetamol overdoses. Can other drugs be a problem? Well, this is in British Medical Journal. Direct quote, untreated paracetamol poisoning may cause varying degrees of liver injury over the 2 to 4 days following ingestion, including fulminant hepatic failure, which basically means you get liver failure. If you don't get a liver transplant, you die. This is a common drug called paracetamol, acetaminophen, Tylenol, depending on where you live, it's all the same molecule. So what they're not saying on this Australian site is, well, look, there's a drug here called paracetamol or another one called ibuprofen. If you've got a viral infection, it might give you a fever. If you take paracetamol or ibuprofen, that might bring the fever down, making you think you're better. I mean, it doesn't come into it. It's, you know, we know that we have to give the right dose of the drug, and yet because it's mentioned on social media, doctors in Australia apparently are so stupid that they can't tell the difference between official guidelines and unreliable social media posts. No offence to doctors in Australia, but that seems to be what is being implicated, and of course that's nonsense. Of course doctors know all about dosing drugs. That is what they do day in, day out. Third reason, final reason, there's been a 3 to 4-fold increase dispensing of ivermectin prescriptions in recent months, leading to a national local shortage for those who need the medicine for scabies and parasitic infections. So Australia's running out of ivermectin, it would appear. It believes that this is due to recent prescribing and dispensing for unapproved uses such as COVID-19. Okay, so that's why they think it is. Such shortages can disproportionately impact vulnerable people, including those in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island communities. Okay. Right, so it looks like the Australian government can't procure enough ivermectin. In India, they make this stuff by the thousands of kilograms. Thousands of kilograms. It is readily available everywhere. And if the Australian government can't work out how to buy a few ivermectin tablets, I'm a bit concerned for everyone in Australia if you can't work that out, Australian government. This is just nonsense. The idea that the Australian government cannot procure enough ivermectin to treat some parasitic infections is such, to my mind, utter nonsense. But why do they even say this? It's such a shallow thing to say. There's only one TGA approved oral ivermectin, that particular product there, 3 milligram blister pack, indicated for the treatment of river blindness, onchocerciasis. Yes, so this is good. So this Australian website is telling us that it's used for the treatment of this horrible condition, onchocerciasis. Here's the World Health Organization note on that here. Onchocerciasis. river blindness. More than 99% of infected people live in 31 African countries. The disease also exists in some foci in Latin America and Yemen. Oh, it doesn't actually mention that you get it in Australia. And just to clarify the issue, they give us a map. So here's where this disease occurs, and as we see, in Australia there isn't any. So why does the Australian website mention that? I really don't know, because there isn't any in Australia. Strange. Having said that, threadworms, intestinal strongyloidiasis, is fairly common in rural Aboriginal and Torres Strait communities, as is scabies, both of which, of course, have excellent alternative treatments. I tend to use a bendazole for strongyloides as a first-line treatment, but anyway, you can't argue with it. It is an indication. But I suspect if the Australian government wanted to order 1 million tablets from India, they could get them pretty quickly. I suspect if they wanted to order 1 billion tablets, they could get them pretty quickly. But hey, they're saying they're running out. All medical practitioners continue to prescribe oral ivermectin for the approved indications. And then they say, however, the prescribing of oral ivermectin for indications not approved is now limited to certain specialists. Presumably they're talking about senior hospital consultants. So there you go. That is the question frequently asked about ivermectin in Australia. So the reasons that ivermectin is not being prescribed in Australia is, firstly, it will stop people getting the vaccine. Secondly, social media posts get the dose wrong. Therefore, doctors can't prescribe it. Thirdly, they're running out of stock. I mean, this is really... that is pathetic, Australian government. Now, what I'm looking forward to for the Australian government is, what's the efficacy? What are the contraindications? Are there contraindications? What are the interactions? Because we know that this drug can interact with a couple of blood thinning, anticoagulant agents, and another antiparasitic agent. What's the evidence that it works? What's the evidence that it doesn't work? But not stuff like this. This is this really adds nothing to the debate and tells me nothing about your view, Australian authorities, of the efficacy of ivermectin or the dangers of ivermectin as a drug in its own right. So there you go. Look at it for yourself. Really, look at it for yourself. I mean, I've said as much as I can. Really, that's it. That's what they say. So there you go. That's from the Australian Government Department of Health Therapeutic Goods Administration. So not a lot further forward really, but if you have stayed to watch this video nonetheless, thank you for watching.
Qui dove il mare luccica e tira forte il vento, lì su una vecchia terrazza davanti al golfo di Sorrento,
un uomo abbraccia una ragazza dopo che aveva pianto, poi si schiarisce la voce e ricomincia il canto. Te voglio bene assai, ma tanto bene assai. È una catena ormai che scioglie sangue in te vena.
potenza della lirica, dove ogni dramma è un falso
E noi correct.
e con un po' di trucco e con la mimica puoi diventare un altro. Ma se la vita che finisce, ma lui non ci pensò poi tanto, anzi si sentiva già felice e ricominciò il suo canto. te voglio bene assai, ma tanto bene sai. Scioglie sangue di te
Te voglio bene assai, ma tanto bene sai.